Let me ask you a question. Here we are in the new year. How many of you, when you made your resolutions, those of you that have not sworn off, I know some people make a point of not making resolutions because then you don't screw up. But those of you that thought about making one, how many of you did your resolution involve another person? Another way to handle a person, or thoughts about how I'm going to handle this person this year? Okay, what did you think? I want to not react. Others might say, I want to react more. I've been too quiet. Others may say, I want to, let somebody know that I love them, but yet there's things that I won't put up with and all that. And the interesting thing about if you've got a button-pushing person in your life, and I'm assuming most of us too who are in the room, either that or you came because you are the button pusher and you're curious, because we're talking about you, is that really, in a very literal sense, when you are dealing with a button pusher, it really does kind of eat up your life and your time and your energy. You ever notice that? How much time that they don't deserve gets eaten up? I had a friend who was talking to me about his button pusher in his life. It was his 24-year-old son. And I mean, everything in my buddy's life revolved around, the kid's an addict, and he's homeless here and he's homeless there and he steals. I mean, he's just a mess. And everything in my friend's life revolves around this kid. And I finally said, I can tell, though, that you're becoming a more spiritual person. He says, how can you tell? I said, because you say, oh, God, so much now. And in a real sense, that's kind of what really happens. Because if there's anything that can bring you to saying, I don't know what to do next, it's having somebody in your life. And remember, our three characteristics, our three aspects, our three traits of a button pusher is someone who causes life issues. In other words, they drive you crazy. Someone who has very little ownership of those life issues, so they blame it on anybody but them, mainly you. And somebody that you're emotionally invested in, so you just can't cut it and leave them and blow them off and end it because you're too tied up, you're too much in love, you're too connected, you have too much history. There's such a kind of the world are together. When you've got somebody in your life like that, it can drive you to God in kind of the right way. So, what we're going to do tonight in this part of the series, we're going to go over 3 of the resources that God provides to us to help us deal in a redemptive way with the button pusher. Because most of us have come to the point where we go, I don't know anymore. Like a good friend of mine said, actually it was, remember Pastor Chuck Swindoll, he used to talk about this a lot. He used to say, my wife and I have decided in our own marriage, no matter how much we bug each other, divorce is not an option. Homicide is, but divorce is not an option. So if somebody like that can have those feelings, you must feel normal. So if you're in your outline, we want to talk first about getting out of hopelessness, meaning that most people, when they have a long-term button-pushing relationship, not like a week-long or a month-long relationship, but somebody you've had some seasons of life with, so you kind of know the dance. You know how they're going to respond. You know what they're going to say when you confront them. You kind of know the crazy things that are going to happen. Most people end up with a very profound feeling or sense of hopelessness. And I want to talk about that because we've got to get you into one hopelessness and get you we've got to get you into one hopelessness and out of another hopelessness. Because guess what? There's a good hopelessness that you need to be feeling. One that you've got to face and embrace and pay attention to because there's something you've got to give up and get hopeless about. If you look in your outline, it says the end of yourself is the beginning. What I mean is the first hopelessness you've got to realize is I'm hopeless in my own strength. I'm not going to be able to change my button pusher in my own efforts, my own smartness, my own love, my own trying harder. And yet that is our first impulse. It is our first move, is trying it harder all by ourselves. And you'd best begin to feel hopeless about that, because that'll get you nowhere. How many of you have finally begun to see that you can't do this with your own effort anymore? See, that's all the tired-looking ones, see? Because people who have finally realized, I'm tired because I've been doing this all by myself, trying to be, nice to them, trying to be strict with them, trying to get them to read books and put them on the coffee table, hoping they'll get into recovery. And it's kind of like not working. Start feeling hopeless about that. I've got a friend who, she's a good friend, I've known her a long time, and she's having a real struggle in life now. And she once told me several years ago, when life wasn't so bad, she said, I think I'm just one of those low-maintenance people. And I said, that's an interesting statement. What do you mean? She said, I don't like to bother people with my problems, and, I think I kind of like handle things myself, and everything's okay. And basically, she was a very highly loving, pretty, structured and organized person. And she could handle a lot of problems because she had a lot of what we would call internal resources. And then life broke down for her, as life does. She began to have some severe marital problems and problems with kids and stuff. And, kind of the trying harder, let's hunker down wasn't working. And we talked a couple of weeks ago, and she said, here's how it's going. I said, do you realize you're starting to become high maintenance? She said, no. I said, no, in a good way. You're starting to become high maintenance because now you're talking to people about your feelings. That's high maintenance. You're asking people for help. That's high maintenance. You're going to people and saying, can I just blurt out what I'm going through? That's high maintenance, as opposed to the other alternative, the low maintenance, which is, how's everything? It's fine. Let me get my meds. I'll be right back. And that's the low maintenance and never works. High maintenance is good. You know why? Because God built you and I that way. Because we're supposed to have needs. And we're supposed to, when life is kind of fraying, at the ends, God's supposed to be there for us. Don't worry about being that kind of high maintenance person. And then the next point, hopelessness to hope. You remember I mentioned that there's a hopelessness you need to get into. There's also a hopelessness that you'll be able to get out of, which is the hopelessness that nothing's going to change, that absolutely nothing's going to change. Because what I've seen is what the Bible and what psychology has been supporting and teaching for many, many years is that people change. That crazy person can change and does change. And I've just noticed that a lot of people, they didn't know what to do with their button pusher because they didn't know what to do with their button pusher. They had never taken, how to deal with a crazy person 101. That course wasn't offered at the local community college on Wednesday nights at 7:15. So they encountered a person that they loved and they cared about, and they had no idea what the skills were. And the hopefulness, the good hope, is that we're going to talk about tonight and next week about the reality that there are some really seriously powerful resources that you can bring to bear on your button pusher. The first thought that comes to people's minds is always, yeah, you haven't met mine. No, I haven't met yours. However, and there really are people that will never change. And there are people who will be that way until they're 94, and then God will be scratching his head saying, what am I going to do with you now? You're dead now. But that's his problem. But my experience as a shrink for so many years is that the hopeless people change when the person trying to help them learns the tools. When you learn the tools, what you need to do and be, and what we're going to talk about, it's kind of amazing how you can be an influence for that person to find light, honesty, and ownership and all those things you dreamed of, which all, if you had to summarize them all, it'd be all of a sudden that they can really connect with you, that they really let you in and you really let them in, and becomes a relationship. Because really, that's what life's about. All of us just want to connect. I mean, all of us just want to know we're not alone out in this, this mud ball, but that there's somebody that really, really cares about us and how we feel and what we're going through. And your button pusher can be a part of that and can change to be that way. No guarantees, but there are certainly lots and lots of things we can do. So let's go into the material here. Here's our first resource. And if you're in your outline, the first resource is kind of the most obvious, and that is God. God. Oh, God. Well, now the outline here on the monitor says others, but I'm kind of on number one, God. Thank you. And the first thing we always have to remember is that God has seen people, believe it or not, worse than your button pusher. He's seen some real wackos come through, the school hall here called Earth. And God is very, very familiar with the process of not only how they got that way, but also why they're staying that way. I've been in the Old Testament a lot for whatever reason. And I'm always amazed at there's like a four-step thing that God talks about over and over again about us, his little button pushers. And you'll be able to identify with this. Because he's like a wounded lover, or he's like a frustrated parent, or he's like somebody who, has somebody in his family, he wants to get it and they don't get it. And the first of the four things is that God loves people. He loves them, and he goes, I'm on your side. I want to resource you. I want to help you. Let's have a connection. Let's get along well. And you can probably remember back with your button pusher when you were maybe full of hope. That there was love there. And there was connection. And there was intimacy and trust. And there was promise. And we can build something here. And then, as God will do, he goes, and then you walked away from me. I mean, the Bible says it in different ways, like we rebelled or we committed idolatry and worshipped ourselves or other things. But whatever it is, we walked away from the love. And how many people can identify that with I really put myself in this relationship. I really invested in it. And then look what you did. You started using. Or look what you did. You became cold to me. Or look what you did. You became irresponsible or deceptive. And that feeling that comes when you've put all of your heart and your soul and all of your good things you've got to offer, and then the person just kind of dismisses them. God feels that. And it helps for you to be able to feel and know that God feels and knows exactly how you feel. That is a tremendous help to know that he's not sitting here just saying, I'm just going to judge things here. He experiences this on a deep and personal level like you do. And there's a third step. And the third step is when he says, so then I implored you, or I invited you. And think about all the conversations you had where you wanted to say, look, can we talk about, what's going on here? Can we reason here? Or this is really a problem for me, or whatever. And you tried to be reasonable, and, we talked about the value of reason with a crazy person last session. But an invitation and an imploring. And he goes, and yet you still didn't want me. And so then he finally says, so after a bunch of imploring, I had to start setting some limits, which he did. And I always kind of think it's funny when he starts talking about the limits. With God, if you're talking to God, or if God's talking about people, he's talking about nations and tribes and stuff in the Old Testament, so it's not with a person all the time. But he'll say things like, and so I disciplined you, so I wiped half of you out. You don't be thinking that way, okay? Probably doesn't help. But he'll talk about, I took away your land, or I took away, I don't know, your prosperity, or I gave you sickness or whatever. And then, after that, he says, and then you said to me, why are you persecuting me? And I started thinking, that's exactly how it is with button pushers. You kind of do everything you can, and then you finally say, this isn't working, and you back off and you set a limit, and they go, you're so mean to me. And you're going, what planet are we on here? I've just been trying to, bring some reality in here. But one of the aspects of a button pusher is that when they feel the pain, their first thought is not, well, this is for my good. Thank you for the growth tip here. One of my kids got grounded, and so he got one of those cell phone things. And when he got the cell phone thing, then he lost the cell phone because he was grounded. And so on his voicemail message, it said, hi, this is Ricky. Probably can't talk to me now because I'm grounded. You're probably calling me thinking you'll talk to me, but you can't because I'm grounded. I'm going to be grounded a long time. So call me at my home. I don't know if they'll let me answer the phone at home either, but call me. And it was like, and I had to listen to that, and I had to say, that is the most victim-y voicemail you have ever left. Well, like, you didn't say anywhere in that message what you did to get that grounding, dude, But that's what we do. And the point is, there's an identification of these 4 steps of I loved you and I cared for you and you walked away, and I implored you and I treated you and you walked away, and I set some limits, and all of a sudden you said I'm persecuting you. If you felt that way, and how many of you have ever felt and experienced that? God bless you. He knows it. He feels it. He's experienced it. He experiences it. Next, he's invested in your difficult person. You see, a really cool thing about this is that one of the things you'll notice if you get in the process of helping your button pusher, your difficult person change, is all of us have to deal with this tendency to think, why do good people suffer and bad guys, prosper? There's always this, I've got the problem here. I've got the financial problem, or I'm feeling broken problem, and they're happy and they're prospering, and you got to go through this whole thing, and there's this sort of like, why doesn't God send them a lightning bolt? He sure sends them to me. And it's sort of like, have they got like a protective shell around them? And the reality is, no. God is highly, highly invested in that person changing. He is not in the process of walking off and letting that person ruin everybody's life in the whole world. He may be using you, or maybe using other people, or some consequence, or some circumstance, but he's very, very invested. And the good thing about God is that he's different in wanting that person to change in one really important way. You and I have sort of a dependency on our button pusher. We're going to talk about dependency in a few minutes. But a lot of times we have a need for that person to change, or good things won't happen. I won't be happy. I won't have the life I want and all that. God is free. He is much freer than you and I are. So he has no need for that person to change. He is not dependent on that person to change. So that means he can do everything he needs to do and wants to do, and that's a good thing. See, God's not going to have a bad day because your button pusher is cold or selfish or clueless or narcissistic or whatever. He's going to go solve it. And he's a very active being. I've had so many people come up to me and say, I never really understood miracles until my difficult relationship happened. I'll say, what do you mean? Well, I started realizing, there's some stuff I needed to do. I needed to step up more and confront more. I needed to, realize what I was doing to be part of the problem. I needed to realize I was an enabler and a rescuer and all those things. And the funny thing is, and I'll hear this so many times, when I started doing that, it seemed like they started hearing that in other places, and they started getting a consistent message about how destructive they were from other places. But it was sort of like nothing really happened until I stepped up to the plate. Isn't that weird? Like, I did my part, and all of a sudden, God, the cosmic chess person, put everybody else in place to form some kind of help for that person. He is highly, highly invested in that person changing. And then thirdly, using faith to see real change. See, I believe that on a God level, most of this is about faith. Not the faith of just wishing and hoping and, man, if I'm just patient, one day things will change. But the life of living faith is when you believe in unseen dynamics and unseen principles that you follow of changing things. Because faith is about what you can't see. And so many of us that have a button pusher in our life, by nature, we're sort of really nice control freaks. We're nice people, but inside there's a little control freak you've got to pay attention to that really wants to help that person shape up, or you're going to send them to military school, or whatever you want to do. We really want to change that person. And with faith, you can't do it that way. You've got to give that person freedom. You have to have a very high value for freedom, that person can make whatever choices they want to make, and you're not going to stop them. And that is the beginning of faith. If you don't have faith, you're going to try to be, a mommy to that person or a daddy to that person. It'll never work. And with faith, you go, I'm going to have to give you all the freedom to make any choices you want to. However, I want to let you know, here's 3 or 4 things that are going to happen that we're going to go into if you do that. Got a friend who was reading the book a few months ago, and she said, I want to let you know what made sense to me in this book. And I said, great, because I really haven't figured that out myself. She said, what made sense to me, because I've got a button pusher, she said, was I realized in that faith section that I am the obstacle to God changing that person. She said, I've been getting in the way. I've been sort of interrupting things that God wanted to do. And I said, tell me. She said, well, my problem is she has a daughter. And she said, I've got a daughter who's mid-20s and kind of is a mess and then isn't a mess and is a mess and isn't a mess. Kind of a messes interrupt us. And I said, so what happened? She says, well, I do this kind of nagging thing for a while, and I'll call a million times, and I'll say, you really ought to get your act together, which is so helpful. And people change in droves when you do that. And then she goes, and then I'll do the thing where I'm threatening and I won't follow up on my threats. And I'll say, I'm going to cut you off without a nickel, and then I'll write her a check for $500, which is a healthy message to send to an immature 25-year-old. And she'll say, and then I'll totally rescue her and say, I'm so sorry you're having a hard life. Let me take care of everything for you, and thinking that the love that I give her will automatically grow her up, not realizing that there's a proverb, I guess in chapter 30, where it says the leech has 2 sisters, give and give. There are some people that just love the love. You might have, your button pusher may love your love and may want your nurturance and love your caring. And nothing ever changes except, more please. Are you going to change? Yeah, one day. More love, please. More money, please. More patience, please. More enabling, please. See, enabling and rescuing and love were never enough to help anybody grow up. Nobody grows up. All of you, closet enablers and rescuers, nobody grew up with just love. So, point being, she said, I learned how to get out of the way. And I learned that God wanted to do things with my daughter that He is doing now. And sometimes my daughter calls me and says, you're being so mean to me. And I'll say, I'm so sorry you're hurting right now. I'll do everything that I feel like I can and that the people in my life tell me I should, because I'm kind of not that objective about you. But I'm learning that you have to deal with God in reality. And so the power comes when you realize it's not that God isn't changing that person, is that maybe some of us need to think, I got to get out of the way. I got to let God help this person experience the consequences, the results. The Bible would call it the fruit of what they're doing, which helps them to grow up. Nobody ever grew up because somebody said, stop that. They grow up when they put their finger on the stove, and what happens? And it burns them. And then they can get mad at the stove all day, but they'll do it again, and they'll do it again. But if they've got a brain in their head, they'll stop it doing it, not because you said stop it, because it burned them. And some of us have got to just kind of pull out of that whole thing and help God help them with the consequences, because He has laid down principles and rules and laws and really cool things that should help that person grow up. Let God do it. He is very, very adept at changing button pushers and has been doing so for many, many, many years. You might find when you do that also, just on a psychological level, you may start feeling anxiety when you stop enabling and rescuing. Now, isn't that weird? Why? It seems like it'd be a relief not to enable and rescue. Well, it is a relief. But if you've been in the position of trying to protect a person and comfort them into growth and rescue them, when you stop doing that, you'll feel this gap. Those of you that have been doing this, you know what I'm talking about. There's this gap and this separation, this space between you and the other person, and you'll feel all sorts of anxious things like your guilt and like, am I killing that person? Am I the meanest person in the whole world? I thought I loved them, and your own feelings will come up. And that's why some of us rescue so much, is to medicate those feelings and to calm down those feelings, because as long as we are invested in all these things we're doing in that person, we don't have to feel what we really should feel about ourselves and our own life and our own insecurities and all those things and our own needs. So I just said that so you'd have fun, because that's really a lot of fun. All right. The next resource is your life. Your life.